I'm here with director Dan Forer of the documentary Sample This. How you doing, Dan, first and foremost?
How you doing? Good. Talk to you.
Great. Thank you for taking time out to do this interview. First question I want to ask you is, how did the idea of doing this documentary about the Incredible Bongo Band and the song Apache come about?
Well, I had heard the Incredible Bongo Band. I heard bongo rock on the radio when I was a kid, and so I was always curious. And I went out and bought the record. And I was always curious, who's the Incredible Bongo Band? Where did they come from? And I thought about it for years, and I read a little bit of stuff online about Michael Wiener and a little bit of the story. But there was an article in the New York Times, I think in 2006, that kind of connected the dots between the assassination of Bobby Kennedy and how, really where the bongo band came from and who the musicians were that were behind it. And then, of course, the impact that it had on hip-hop, and basically it was the national anthem of hip-hop. And so I just thought it was a great story, and and it's an important part of music history, and I decided to make the film.
And how did you go about getting all these different artists to do the interviews on the bongo band?
Well, I mean, at first I had to kind of track them down because they're really, unfortunately, Michael Wiener passed away about a month after I started working on the film, and I almost thought that I wouldn't be able to do the film. But then I started calling some of the musicians, and one of the first people that I called was Perry Botkin Jr., who I didn't have a hard time finding him, and he was kind of the musical brains behind the Incredible Bongo Band, and he introduced me to some of the other musicians, but I had to do a lot. That meant going and looking through old union contracts and talking to people to really find out what the story was behind the Incredible Bongo Band.
All right, and explain Michael Wiener's importance to the bongo band for people that don't know.
Well, Michael Wiener was the guy that came up with the idea for the band and named the band and hired the people that wound up making the music. But he really he was a music supervisor on a film called The Thing with Three Heads. And being a music supervisor, you have to find music for a film, and usually you're also in charge of the soundtrack album that would come along with the film. And he was short some tracks, so they had some songs by Jerry Butler, for example, the soul singer, and a few other ones that were in the film, and they wanted to put out this album, and they were short some tracks. And Wiener had always loved bongo rock, the instrumental by Preston Epps, and so he decided to put together a studio group and record some tracks to put on the soundtrack album. And that's the first time the Incredible Bongo Band sort of appeared as a band or as an entity. And for the soundtrack album for The Thing with Two Heads, which you can still find out there, and the vinyl is fairly expensive. But so Michael Wiener was the guy that came up with the idea, named the band, and he was working for a guy at the time at MGM called Mike Curb. And Mike Curb had a group called Mike Curb's Congregation. And I think Curb told him, look, if you're going to have this band, attach your name to it so that, it'll get you known and your name will be known in show business. And so then it became Michael Wiener's Incredible Bongo Band. And they released a single, the remake of Bongo Rock, and it became a half-decent hit in the United States, and it became a huge hit in Canada. And it was then that they decided to make an album, and it was during the making of the album, obviously, that was, when the track Apache came into existence.
All right. And from what you spoke with the musicians, how did Apache come about? From what they told you.
Well, for the musicians, you have to remember the musicians that were involved in the sessions were all studio musicians. So they played on, in most cases, hundreds of hits. They would be hired for a day or two. They would come in. Producer would give them charts. They'd run the songs down a couple of times, and then literally make a hit record, in an afternoon. And so, but they had hundreds of these sessions. And so one kind of blurred into another, and they really didn't think a whole lot about them unless something really unusual happened, or, maybe there was an extra special famous musician or something that was participating. But for them, it was just another job. And the Bongo Band, the album was just another job. And they went up to Vancouver to record it, and it was just one of hundreds of sessions that they did. And for the most part, they never really thought much of it, because it's not like they were doing it for, a famous artist or working with somebody. I mean, it was this no-name studio group, and it was, tracks that had come out of a B movie, and so they really didn't think anything of it.
And talk about King Arison.
Well, King Arison is the Bongo Band. He's the percussionist, and other than the drummer, that's really the heart of the band. And he's one of the best and greatest percussionists. Started with Motown, was discovered, in the Bahamas by Sean Connery, and wound up in the movie Goldfinger. And so he's actually in the film, and then he wound up coming to the U.S. and started doing work for Motown on the West Coast when Motown was moving to Detroit and doing things in L.A. And he also became Neil Diamond's percussionist and recorded with Neil and goes on the road with them still to this day. And I think they go back to 1975 or 1976. And so he's had a very long career. Also had a decent solo career. He had a sort of a hit with Have a Nice Day. Recorded a couple of albums in the mid-'70s that have also been sampled and used. And but he's still an active, great musician to this day.
And do you feel the documentary will honor the memory of Michael Wiener?
Definitely. I mean, Michael Wiener was not without any flaws. He was kind of a troubled guy, and later on in his life, he was involved in the publishing business, and got into some controversy around O.J. Simpson and that kind of thing. But in the mid '70s, I mean, he was in the music business kind of by accident, and without him, there wouldn't have been any Bongo Band, and without the Bongo Band, there wouldn't have been Apache. So you really, I certainly give him credit where credit is due. And he was definitely an interesting person and an important piece of the puzzle.
All right, and can you talk about the story about Joe Sample and the Crusaders doing the bongo rock?
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things that people that I found out from doing all the research is that there are about 30 or 32 different musicians that can really say that they were in the Incredible Bongo Band. And part of that is that bongo rock and Apache were two completely different sets of musicians. And bongo rock, King Arison did not play on bongo rock. He played on Apache. But bongo rock was Bobby Hall, also a Motown percussionist, and the drummer was a guy named Ed Green, who had played on all the Barry White hits. And then the rhythm section, the keyboard player was Joe Sample. I think the bass player was Wilton Felder, or the guitar, I don't remember which really were the Crusaders guys, and minus the drummer. And so that was bongo rock and Bongolia, which was the flip side of bongo rock. And so that was that Incredible Bongo Band. And then when they went to do the album, well, the album was Jim Gordon and King Arison and Mike Dacey and a guy named Robbie King. And so there was that group of guys that were responsible for basically everything on the first album except for bongo rock and Bongolia. And then, of course, there was a second album, The Return of the Incredible Bongo Band, and that consisted of leftover stuff from the Vancouver sessions that they didn't put on that first album. And then there were other tracks that Wiener got from other producers that he bought. And one of them was from Keg Johnson, who was involved with the Silvers. There's a track on the second album called Kaburi that came from him, and Harvey Mason was the drummer on that track. And there was another track called Okie Dokie that came from a producer called Wes Farrell, and a great drummer named Hal Blaine was on that track. And so, the best drummers in the world at the time really did play in the Incredible Bongo Band. And then there's the matter of Apache. Apache, really, I believe the drummer on Apache was a Vancouver guy named Cat Hendricks. And King did play the percussion on it, and it was overdubbed in L.A., but when they did the original Vancouver sessions, they ran out of time, and they had a couple of songs left to do, and one of them was Apache. And Wiener got the local guy who was sort of running the sessions in Vancouver to get some local musicians, and they did Apache, and they did Let There Be Drums, and then the tracks were sent down to L.A., where King Arison added, his percussion. And there may have been some overdubbing or some work with Jim Gordon as well, although it's very unusual you can't really overdub drums. You can add everything else, but drums are kind of the heartbeat of it, and it's not something you would normally overdub. And it's also, if you listen to the album, if you listen to the Apache and some of the other tracks, it's pretty obvious that it's two different drummers. And but anyway, so that's my so I really believe the actual Apache break is a guy named Cat Hendricks from Vancouver and King Arison playing the percussion.
And do you feel the documentary will help educate fans and introduce new ones to the Incredible Bongo Band and their important contributions to music and hip hop in particular?
Yeah, I think I'll tell you the one thing about film is that, it's not really a hip-hop film, and it's very accessible. So for someone that really doesn't even know anything about hip-hop, they get schooled on what it is and where it came from, and it's a good history lesson. If you're a fan of hip-hop, it gives you some perspective as to how the culture and how the music got started, and because the Incredible Bongo Band was there at the very beginning of it. And so it just gives you some perspective as to where it all came from.
Okay. And is there any artists you wanted to get for the documentary that you couldn't get? Be part of it?
Yeah, I think for a few more people from the world of hip hop, I would have liked to have, had Grandmaster Flash in it. Some of the people that were around at the very beginning, although I think that I was very fortunate to get some of the people who were there at the beginning in the film, and then, somebody who really was very passionate about the Bongo Band in Questlove, and he was very generous in appearing in the film and giving his perspective on how important really Apache and the Incredible Bongo Band were to hip-hop. Africa Bambaataa. So I really, you always want to get, everybody, but I think that there are some great people from the world of hip hop in the film, and then there are people, who were sort of not, because hip hop wasn't around. From the 60s and 70s, that were a big part of music, who contributed to the Incredible Bongo Band, I think there's 25 or 26 different interviews in the film.
Do you plan to do a part two of the documentary?
Yeah, there's always a possibility. By the way, the title "Sample This," Michael Wiener was planning on doing a new album with the Bongo Band and with King Arison, and he was going to call it "Sample This." So that's where I came up with the title from, is that Michael Wiener wanted to, so it's a little bit of a tribute to him in the title, and it obviously also talks about exit to hip hop and the fact that Apache has been sampled so many times.
All right, and also told me that you were able to get his ex-wife to be part of the documentary and do as far as open up the archives, and she was also interviewed.
No, Unfortunately, his ex-wife, they had gone through a divorce, and they were sort of just finished up when I kind of came on the scene. And I think there was still some sort of, those are traumatic things. And so she was dealing with that, but she certainly was very helpful in as far as licensing music and, giving me what she could to tell the story, and I appreciate it very much. And unfortunately, she passed away a little over a year ago, and she was quite young, and it was kind of a sad footnote to the story. And so, both of them are no longer with us.
And what's next for you, Dan, after this?
My next project is completely, it's a family kids movie that is, it's just, and then after that, I'm hoping to do a thriller, and then maybe after that, I'll think about doing another documentary. One of the things I have thought about when I interviewed all these studio musicians, a lot of whom are, getting on in years, but they told me a lot about the studios. I shot a lot of the interviews of the musicians in the great studios of Los Angeles, and there aren't many of them left. And so I have a ton of material about, from studio musicians and some interviews and some things that just didn't make it into Sample This. So I might do something to sort of honor the studios and the studio musicians of the 60s and 70s. And so that might be another documentary. And then the hip hop, in terms of Sample This, I kind of end, in the early 80s, which was really just where hip hop was starting to come into its own. And, it had a long way to go from there. So that, that could be that could be a part two.
And on a more personal note, which is your favorite of the hip hop sample that have used Apache, the one that you enjoyed the most?
I like the Nas one, and I use that in the film. Amy Winehouse, which is another one that I used in the film. But I've heard there was a clever use of it in a Mick Jagger track that I can't remember, that was from the 90s. I mean, people have done so much with it, and it's really hard to pick a favorite, because what's amazing about the Apache break and Apache is how versatile it is, and how people keep thinking up new and creative ways of using it, and are using it. Somebody right now is messing around with it and doing something with it, and including it in a contemporary track.
All right. And what do you have a website or anything you want to plug in?
Yeah, well, we have a good active Facebook. So if you want to get there are some outtakes and some clips, and it's just Sample This Movie. So if you Facebook / Sample This Movie, that you can find us on Facebook. We also are on Twitter, same thing. But the Facebook is the best place, because we regularly put information of screenings, where you can go see the film on the big screen. And it's available on iTunes. I mean, if you go to iTunes and put Sample This into the search box, it'll take you to it'll come up, and you can rent the film on iTunes, or you can buy it. There'll be a DVD release in December if you want to give it to somebody as a present. And I know it's still on all the on-demand, all the big cable systems like Time Warner. If you go to the on-demand and search for it, you can watch it there as well. So the film is out, and like I say, the best place to find up-to-date information on what we're doing. We've got a screening coming up in Vancouver, Canada, because we haven't shown the film yet there, so that's coming up the 18th of November. But there will also be, we're planning on taking it to a bunch of colleges and universities over the next 3 or 4 months. So go find us on Facebook, and you can find out what's happening with the film.
And how has been the reception as far as the critics is concerned?
Well, it's gotten great reviews. I mean, we, starting with the New York Times gave the film a great review, the Village Voice, the Washington Post. I mean, all the sort of mainstream big reviewers have just praised it and said it's a terrific film. We haven't gotten a lot of reviews from the music press and from sort of music publications, and we're working on that, and we're trying to reach out to them and make them aware of the film. But there's a lot of films out there, and it's hard to get noticed. And we're competing with Hollywood films that spend $20 million on advertising, and films like Sample don't have that luxury. So we really have to rely on people sort of getting the word out and spreading the word, and guys like you to let people know that the film is even out there.
Any last words you want to add?
No, I mean, it was 4 years of my life to make the film, and I had a terrific time meeting all these great musicians and people from both worlds, of hip hop and shooting stuff in the Bronx and New York, and Kaz and Bambaataa and all these great people, and telling this story, and I'm really thankful that I had the opportunity to do it. And I hope people enjoy the film and they learn something about music and an important part of music.
All right, and before I forget, Dan, being that I'm a hip hop generation guy, how do you feel about hip hop music and the way it's they sampled? It's been
well, I think it's great.
Has it opened your mind?
Yes.
With doing this documentary.
Absolutely, because I developed an appreciation. When I sat with, Afrika Bambaataa when he was doing his radio show in New York, and I listened and I watched what he was doing with music and changing it and combining it and flipping it around. I mean, it's absolutely amazing, and it's an art form, and it's a great form of music. Do I like all hip hop? Obviously not, but there are whole sections of it and creative uses of the Apache break that, how can you not like it? And so it's totally opened my eyes, because I'm of a different generation. I'm the 60s and the 70s, and so it's not the music of when I was a teenager, but I have a great appreciation for it, and I am constantly amazed at how it's evolving and changing. And let's face it, hip hop is the music of popular culture today. That's what's played on the radio.
All right. Any last words you want to add, Dan?
No, listen. Thank you for taking the time to do this, and I'm thankful that you're letting people know about the film, and I just hope people get a chance to see it.
Well, my pleasure, Dan. Thank you for doing this interview for HuMagTV.com.
Thank you.
Welcome.